welcome back, you guys, to another episode of Paul and Aaron Blue Collar American Show. So we were just discussing a little bit off camera before we started this, how we're going to start this out. We wanted to let you know we're going to be starting up our own social media here pretty soon. We're going to be on YouTube. We're going to be on Rumble. I'm sure we'll be on some other platforms as well. But we wanted to get this show started today. So here we are, and here we go, right?
Yeah, every episode is a little different, and as you can tell by our setting, we're also just trying to figure out the best way to
well, it'll take time.
Showcase.
We'll get it going.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, tell us about the beer we're drinking today, Aaron.
Well, today we're repeating something that we've already had, which is the Rogue Dead Guy Dead and Dead.
Okay.
So a local watering hole, Tap and Fill, put their partial keg back on after they went through all of their pumpkin ales and all of their fresh hop IPAs. And to my happiness, they put the Dead and Dead back on. The Dead Guy is on as well, and there's a whole nother keg of it right behind it, but not the Dead and Dead. So
Sure like the color.
Dead Guy Ale.
From the last one we had, I thought is this one aged in the...
This is the one aged in the Dead Guy whiskey barrels.
Okay.
So Dead Guy Ale aged in Dead Guy whiskey barrels.
Well, cheers.
Cheers.
We're doing this new camera today, so it's kind of hard for it to... but cheers.
That is delightful. I would highly recommend that if anybody who's into barrel-aged whiskey...
Yeah, that's good.
...beers, to check this out, because it's not over the top like most bourbon barrel-aged stouts and ales are. Say, for example, Goose Island, or I think even Belching Beaver has one or two of them, but the 11, 12, 13, 14% ABV ales.
I was gonna say it's easy to sip at. You start getting up there a little ways.
This has a hint of all of that, but it's also, what is it, 9.8? I think is the ABV. Actually, I think I wrote it down.
I thought it was 10.
9.5.
9.5. Okay.
Yeah. So it's not even over the top. It's still something that's a good sipping beer. It's got a great flavor. Has the tone of bitterness, but also all those malty, caramely tones. Mm-hmm. And then there's the sweet factor that comes in mid-palate because
it does have some caramely tones to it.
Because of the barrel aging that goes on there. So it's pretty cool.
Sure.
I'm pretty excited about it. So I'm glad we broke another one open this morning.
Yeah, I thought, it was hard. You texted me earlier, and you were like, what kind of beer should we try today? And you gave me a few choices, and the Dead and Dead's a hard one for me. I really liked the last one we had, but I really like this one a lot too. I thought, you know what? Let's do that Dead and Dead. That sounds good.
I think we'll also crack open some of the IPAs that I think I've got 4 or 5 IPAs left from the beer fest from last year.
Oh, cool.
As the way that they pay the volunteers is that they will
get paid in beer.
Paid in beer. Yeah, so you line up behind the
that would
big
be a good barter
truck.
system.
It's pretty sweet. You line up behind the truck on the last day, well, it's the day after the end of the beer fest, so it's Sunday morning, and you show up and get in a big long line with all the other volunteers and the folks that have been running the show. Crack open the big garage door of the semi-trailer where everything's been intentionally mixed up, and as soon as the clock chimes, 9 a.m. I think it is, and not a second before, they start handing you 12 packs.
Oh, that's cool.
In just random boxes and just random beers in there. And then you run to your truck or you run to your special spot on the sidewalk and you run back to the line. And you can get through the line a couple of times. We got to go through 5 times.
Backpacks and pillowcases and
some people
Halloween
have
bags.
They've got like wagons. They've got kid strollers that are empty, no kids in them. They're just like pushing them through. I mean, it's all a big laugh because some of these old guys with big old beer bellies are just like... running to the back of the line, and everybody's like, hurry up, go!
Like a kid in a candy store,
Super fun. But what that does is it just is a bunch of random stuff that were all submitted by all the breweries from all over the region. Because
we have a great beer fest.
This is the Rocky Mountain.
It really is a great beer fest here in Idaho Falls.
Is that Rocky Mountain area, or Rocky Mountain States Beer Festival. Mm-hmm. And
it's always been really good. They used to do it in the baseball field. Before it was Melaleuca Field, it was called McDermott Field.
Right.
And then they redid the whole thing. Melaleuca was the major supplier and provider for all that stuff, so they renamed it Melaleuca Field. and then they got rid of the beer fest from McDermott Field. And so
Yeah, because Melaleuca took it over. So.
Melaleuca took it over, right? You know, I was actually driving down Sunnyside the other day, out there by Sunnyside Acre Trailer Court, and there's a big plot of land right next to that Basic American Foods out there.
Yes.
And I was like, I wonder who owns this. It's never been anything. It's just sitting here. It's, not doing anything. So I looked it up, and Melaleuca owns it.
Oh.
Isn't that strange? Yeah,
well, yes, but no, because
kind of
he
a landowner
just
company.
buys all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
He's got multiple cattle ranches and
meat packing plant out west of town now. I mean, he's I guess his house out west of town is a sight to behold too. They've got supposedly, I mean, rumor has it, I mean, nobody ever really knows. Lifestyle's rich and famous, right? But supposedly there's a tunnel network underground, and he's got his own grocery store underground out there for his family.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know any of that. But that also sort of checks with the culture of the preppers and okay, interesting.
Yeah, he's got his own horse ranch and all kinds of stuff out there. So it's interesting. It really is an interesting dynamic what you have going on, and when you've got all that money out there, I've always affectionately called it FU money, but that's what it is. When you have lots and lots of money, you can do whatever you want to do with it. And why not? Let's build a grocery store underground, Aaron. I'll go get the tunnel machine.
Maybe someday we'll get there.
Yeah,
I don't really think that I want to turn it into FU money. I think that some of my biggest dreams and therefore deepest prayer life, getting deep already here, sorry, but just asking the Lord about finances and saying, provide a job that can provide for the family and then some.
Yeah.
My intentions behind having money are not actually to blow it all off on all these like fun things and, multiple houses and stuff like that, but rather to care for my family and all my extended family, and then to be generous.
And if there are multiple houses, it's for an income purpose. Maybe you start like a business, real estate investment.
You let them work for you.
Right.
Parable of the talents, so to speak.
Yep.
You don't just have it sitting there not doing anything, but rather you let it, one, be useful to other people, two, be working for you in return. And so that's always been, is my mindset, my heart in the right place for that kind of thing. But it hasn't come yet, so we just are faithful with what we've got, and we are generous with what we have as much as possible, and just say, you know what, it's just money, right? As you and I have talked lots of times, it's just money. It comes and goes.
It comes and goes.
It's mostly gone for me.
Mostly goes for most people,
It hasn't come yet, so maybe someday that will happen.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up the story, the story of the parable of talents, because I mean that's so true, isn't it? I mean, you make it when you are blessed enough to make some money and get things going. It's important to do right with it, so that you can, so you don't end up with having the money go more than it comes in. So that's something. It's a hard lesson I've learned a time or two in my life. I would even look at last year as a lesson for that.
Sure, you learned. You learned some things.
Yeah.
But you were incredibly generous with it to your family, so it's not that you did anything necessarily frivolous. It's just that the real estate market is like a roller coaster. It has a lot of ups and downs, and you don't know if it's going to be really high or really low, or it could just be whoops.
Right.
You never know.
Right.
I mean, again, politically speaking is what drives all of that, and there's all kinds of things happening right now in our political world that
in the world
could definitely the world too, could definitely just change all that for you in a moment and just notice. Yeah, I mean it's all about the interest rates. I mean everything revolves around which is the way they designed it. That's what they designed it. They want to keep everything under control, and they've done a good job at designing it that way for sure. I loved what you sent me, by the way. We have to share that meme. Yeah,
we have to share that meme because that's a good one.
Pardon me for reaching behind my camera scene here, but
I loved that screensaver you had going there too. That was cool.
Oh yeah, that's just part of the me turn off this guy from sharing so I can.
There you go. That's so interesting how those, how Mac reacts versus Windows. I've always been a Windows guy.
Mm-hmm.
I finally started venturing into some Apple products this year for the first time in my life, and it's still, I mean, I'm starting to notice everything, like there's so many different things that Apple does, and so I'm starting to pay attention to the computers and the way they react, and the phones and the way they react, and I'm still learning so much stuff. Today I was in a training. Ironically, it was about building relationships and
Wow.
keeping those relationships. And the instructor was my partner, Dan, and he. So I'll dive off on that in a minute. But I was in the class there, and he looked over at his phone. He says, the magic words, the hey S word, I don't want our phones to go tweak out here, but he says the hey S word, and he says make a note or take a note, tell me to call so and so at
Oh yes, the
3:30 or something.
the private secretary of everyone who owns an iPhone. That's the S word that we're referring to.
Yes, yep,
Or
yeah.
the secret mistress of every.
Yeah, exactly, right. I still think it would be neat if Google and Apple and all of them alike, Amazon's kind of touched on it a little bit. With their Alexa system, you can rename it like Ziggy or Echo or Computer or whatever you want, and it does a really good job of voice recognition too.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish we could do that with our phones and have like a private name that we could call it. We could name it ourselves or whatever, because Dan will get in the room with me with my phone, and our voices are similar enough that, and normally iPhone's flawless with this, but with Dan and I, it must be a perfect, like a pretty good voice recognition or similarity that the recognition software on the
Right.
iPhone, has a
Mm-hmm.
hard time. So anyway, when he says the magic words, my phone lights up, his phone lights up. Sometimes Andrew's phone lights up, and it's like, oh man, now that we all got
Yeah.
iPhones.
So maybe if you were to have had um, a name change for it so that she didn't recognize the generic name
Yes,
is what you're referring to. I
yes.
follow what you're saying now.
I think that would be nice just to have something, He could call his Sally, and I could call mine Harry or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm. When Harry met Sally.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Well, I mean, the reason why we got on this topic is because I happen to have my iPad here plugged into my MacBook system, this is my desk, and so we're, as we mentioned at the beginning of this, trying to change our camera angles and just how we're sitting and looking at each other. But my daily routine is to have these two large monitors behind me here, working to where I can do all my design work across two monitors. But I also plug my iPad in, and it can also be an external monitor through the operating system. And so it kind of takes over what the iPad would normally do and have its own operating system, and it is like a screen for this. And so I put all of my tracking software for how the processors are doing, the fan speeds, the disk usage, batteries for all of my Bluetooth connected devices, and I just forgot to disconnect it. So just
Very
turned it
cool that you can
off,
do all that.
did all
Jeez,
that bump, and then
just learn more about that.
oh yeah,
I didn't know you could do all.
and you can also take your iPhone, if we weren't doing this here, and you could project your screen from your iPhone not just to Apple TVs, but you can also project them to your Mac. So if you had,
And your watch.
and your watch as well. Well, the watch can control the phone for certain apps,
Yeah,
but I
that's
could
neat.
actually show the screen of this phone on my monitors
Oh,
over here. It's
okay.
like a reflection of the phone screen. As a matter of fact, the very first day you and I were trying to do this, remember I had my laptop sitting here? That's what I was doing, is I was transmitting from the phone to the laptop, showing what we see on the
So you
phone,
could see
so I
the
could
camera
see what
angles and
was
all that.
going
Yeah,
on.
yeah.
Anyway, all these little tech gadgets
Sorry,
and
yeah,
things,
it's
but it's actually kind of cool. If anybody has any questions about how to run a Mac system, I'd love to talk about that. I love to talk
Aaron is a guru. Yep.
through Apple products, not because I believe in everything that there is from a company's agenda and or ethos, but rather this system, this software, this operating system, and this hardware I've been using for almost 20 years now in my marketing and graphics and advertising world, and I never have any problems. I am able to utilize all the tools that Apple comes up with, plus a few add-ons that are synchronized with the way that Apple runs their software, but also when you have all the similar tools in your home, things are seamless across, all your kids and wife's iPhone. I have multiple Apple TVs plugged into the televisions. We've got multiple, as a matter of fact, this orange device on my desk is a speaker, so it's the HomePod Mini, and I've got a couple other HomePods in the house, and so it's similar to the Sonos system. It's also similar to Bose. I think they have a small system, but Apple has their own little network that's all part of a HomeKit, and so when things kind of like Handshake, you can share things across them.
That's pretty cool.
And then even when guests come into the home, they can transmit to either a speaker or to a television or whatever. And so say you're like, hey, check out this photo.
If they have an iPhone.
If they have an iPhone, if they're part of an Apple network, they can just jump on my Wi-Fi. And even sometimes it doesn't even require
Well,
the
I've
Wi-Fi.
loved this. I've loved the seamless interface that we have together now that I've got an iPhone too. I mean, you send me calendar invites and I can accept them, and it automatically meshes our calendars, and it's really a pretty cool system when everybody has an iPhone. So
Yeah, and I'm not at all trying to tell everybody that they have to have an iPhone. And there's a lot of people that really want to not be part of the Apple family.
sure.
Again, this is just my
Well, I was
personal
one of those
opinion,
people
and-
for a long time.
Sure.
For a long time, I was. I mean,
Well, you had a very specific reason why you jumped over to iPhone, and that has to do with your work situation.
It did.
And it has to do with the way that your incoming calls would go. Is it seemed as if there was favor towards folks that had
it
an
worked.
iPhone and or the network. And,
It worked.
and there you go.
It worked.
There was a delay on any of your other
There was.
devices.
On the Samsung, I had an S22. I still have that phone. I still use it.
Just for phone calls. That's what's wild. So that's both. Well, you're still on the Verizon network, though, right?
I am.
But it's weird
But
how
this-
the device
yeah.
is different. And that actually leads us to another point that I'd like to make sure that we're saying in our show notes as well, is that all of this is filmed on both of our iPhones.
Yeah, right.
So we've got two tripods sitting right here facing each other, and so these are all filmed on iPhones. And so that's just something else to be said about the power of what these cameras can do. And then I'm editing it just with basic iMovie. That's one of those softwares that comes with the operating system on a Mac, and I just kind of spend some time clicking back and forth between the two of us when we're talking, and synchronize the audio and put a beginning and an ending, and away we go. Upload it to YouTube, put some show notes in there, and there we go. Boy, that was a little bit of a tangent.
We really, I was going to say, we really
All
took
for one
a
little
squirrel.
But I think it was a good one too, because
This is going to be a great squirrel too, though.
technology is something that overwhelms people.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I was going to say too, so I used Android. I was in the Android, arena for most of the time.
Universe.
And so if anybody has questions about Android, we're kind of like the perfect team that way, because I worked for Verizon for 2 years.
Right.
But I worked for Verizon for 2 years before Verizon got the iPhone. Remember, they kind of lagged behind AT&T for a long time.
Well, it had to do with their network.
Yeah.
And how I don't think that Apple had it designed for multiple networks. They designed it
That's correct.
first for AT&T.
That's correct. Yep, that's correct.
Which is who I've been with ever since we were married. And even before that, I only took a quick hiatus because we were poor. But as a
Excuse me.
when I still lived at home, my parents have had AT&T as well for the longest time. So I mean, I've been an AT&T customer for probably 30 years, if that even is possible. I'm not doing the math in my head, but it's been a long time. My dad has always been on the tip of technology, trying to keep business going. He's an electrical contractor and an inspector, and so he loves gadgets. I love gadgets, and my kids love gadgets. So
I love
He's
gadgets
always had
too.
a
Yeah.
he's always had a mobile phone ever since there was car phones.
Even the big old bricks.
But before that, they were a bag.
Yep, the bag
It was
phones.
like a purse
I
phone kind
remember
of
that.
thing. You'd pull it out, and the keypad would be on the back side, and you turn it around, and you still got a cord going down to your bag. And
Yeah,
I'm like, got your purse, Dad? When I was like
had the wire on it.
14, and
The
and then
bag
they
phones.
went to the gray ones that in the 80s or early 90s, whatever that was, that everybody knows of, is that like really deep but really narrow, but that's when the buttons went from the back to the front, and then it had that big old black antenna sticking out of it. Who was that made that phone?
Motorola, I think,
Was
wasn't it?
it? Wow.
I'm pretty sure it was Motorola.
Anyway, yeah, my uncle had that phone, so I've been around technology for a little while. It's kind of like my second language. Before I ever converted to Mac, we always had Windows devices,
Yeah.
Windows computers, or operating system on our computers. And even before that, my dad used to have
That's true.
DOS.
That's really showing our age because
Really showing.
because we really did when Windows took over, they really took over, and then Mac kind of started coming back in, which I thought was really neat because I didn't want Windows. I mean, anytime you get one company that's just controlling everything with and computers control everything now, it's just not a good situation. So to see Mac come back into it, that was really. I remember I was like, okay, that's good. Because in the beginning they had little Macs in your classroom when we were kids.
Yep.
And then of course they were really rudimentary back then. I mean, you'd write a bunch of code all day long to get it to draw a circle for you.
Yep.
And then you'd get a grade on it. And of course that's kind of transformed into what that's where it all started.
Mm-hmm.
But then Macs kind of went away. They were the first home computer though, weren't they? Macintosh.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then they kind of
Apple
went
One,
away.
Apple Two.
When Windows 95 came out, I remember Windows 95.
Yep.
That was like the first time an operating system came out that transformed everything.
Yeah, it hit the market
Yep.
good. And,
Yep, and then it was 97 and 98, and I mean,
XP
Yep,
and then NT for the networking side, and that's when I was in on it too. At junior college, I was an assistant to a AutoCAD lab at the junior college, and the woman who was the instructor of the class was also certified as a network administrator. That's the word. And so I learned a lot from her too about how to set up users per station. And there was like a lab of, I think it was 25 or 30 stations, and they were all fast enough to run high-end AutoCAD, but also 3D Studio Max at the time, which was 3D rendering software, and yet it was all on Windows. There was a Mac lab at the school, but again, just like you're talking about, the Macs never really were able to keep up with any of the hardware side of what was going on.
Right.
And more importantly, their operating system was flawed. OS 9. The original, I mean, that's the one that everybody knew about, was OS 9. And so whenever there was Macs in a school setting, it usually meant that those were purchased at the lowest bid. Like you put it out to bid, and whoever could do it at the cheapest is who would then supply the school, the college, whatever the case may be, with here's the Mac lab, here's the PC lab. You know? And so I remember back, this wasn't junior college, it was after I went away to school.
And everything was still on those old tube monitors too.
Tube monitors.
Ironically, this is what made Mac explode on the map, was those
when they had the tube monitor, but that was the whole computer was just the monitor. It was
do you
called
remember?
the iMac. That was their very first one.
And they
had
came
all
in
those
different
colors.
And it really sprung them back into the market. People loved the design.
And that was even pre-OS 10. OS 10 popped it.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden it was a very WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, operating system. Windows had started it. That's why Windows, because you kind of like would go into window. A window meant that you're, completely different way of looking at the interaction between user and device.
Right.
To now have these what we call folders and windows and file structures and all this kind of stuff. It was all code based, or it was all you had to command line everything. And so now a very visual representation of an operating system was cutting edge back then.
Right.
And this was just mid to late 90s. I mean, it's not even that long ago.
Yeah.
Really.
None of it
is, but it isn't.
I mean, it's crazy to me what we've done in the last 30 years, if you think about it. I mean,
know.
it's unbelievable.
I know.
I didn't get my first computer till I was in college. I think it was like 95 or 96. 96, I guess it would have been. And I was just so taken by this new computer that I remember I'd skip my homework and everything because I was screwing around on my computer, and so it wasn't really good for me at first, but boy,
So
I couldn't
I
believe.
graduated high school in 95, and then I started college the next, that same year, 95, 96, but that was junior college, and I was there for 3 years. And then I decided to move away to San Francisco and go to art school and learn a bunch of stuff. And then that only lasted a year. We got married. I took a little bit of time off. We then moved down to Orange County, California, which is where Anaheim and Disneyland and all that is. So I went to a school there. And by that time, so 2000, I had purchased my own PC. It was a laptop, and an HP laptop that was like this thick.
Yeah, but still the coolest thing ever.
But I would do all of my graphic design work because I was going with a graphic design major on my own computer, and I would go to these labs, referring back to what I was saying a few moments ago about the labs being built by the lowest bidder, because in the educational system they don't have a lot of money.
Right.
So they've got to get the best deal possible. What that usually means is that the components and the hardware and the software aren't all the way ramped up, to the fastest thing on the market. So the teacher would be up in the front, and he'd have a projector, and so he'd be projecting all of what he's doing on the wall, and we're all trying to replicate that, learning how to use Photoshop, like
the old projectors. I remember that.
Yeah,
pull the screen
big old
down.
machine, pull the screen down. But they were able to project through the computer, so that was still pretty high-end technology then too. But I would go, when they weren't looking, at unplug the network cable out of the back of these school Macs and plug the network cable into my own laptop and push the keyboards and the mouses and the whole monitor and everything out of my way and draw circles around all of my colleagues, because they're dealing with, like, we're waiting for this thing to render, and I'm like, I'm done already, I'm on the next project.
Yeah, right.
And that's the mindset that I used to have, is PC all the way, Macs suck, and I mean, sure enough, they really struggled during that time. But as soon as OS 10 came out, I had a job a little bit later.
Yeah.
And they were software programmers, and so they were all PC based and wrote code for and built operating system driven programs for enterprise solutions. And I was their office manager and part-time graphic designer with them. Well, the boss decided to go get the next generation of an iMac. I guess he got a really good deal on somebody who didn't like it, and he bought it from him. And so after those candy iMacs came the really thin for what that was, the LED or LCD monitor iMacs. And they were all white.
Yeah.
Like milky white. And they were thin, and, a 17-inch monitor.
They were always
and
so key on their design.
itself.
I mean, the design is really what helped Mac.
So it was, he brought it in, and he's like, I don't know how to use this thing. You figure it out. And that was the beginning of the end. Because then I have it sitting there, kind of like this setup. It was all PCs. I had multiple monitors, and I'm doing all kinds of things in Windows, and then we're playing our video games, because the boss loved to play, little video games and things like that. And so we would have our lunch breaks and everything and play Unreal Tournament in 2004, and we'd play, like Diablo 2 and play Halo.
Oh, I remember that.
Halo when it was out on the computer, Halo 1, this is, again, dating us. But he handed me this iMac, and he's like, figure it out and tell me whether or not we can do anything with it and whether or not you can do anything with it. And I found a way to load all the Adobe software onto it. Photoshop,
Wait, so
Illustrator.
when you were playing Halo, were you playing that on your Mac?
Mm-mm.
No, it was on. That was PC.
PCs,
Okay.
Yeah.
I was
Because
gonna
we
say,
were all PC guys,
I was gonna say, because that's a Windows game, or that was a Windows game.
Keyboard, mouse.
I still don't know if you
those
can play it
things.
on Mac Halo, because it's Microsoft.
Yeah, it's all Microsoft based.
Microsoft game, but I think it's a Microsoft.
That was
game.
the beginning of the end, because that Mac just chugged. Like, it was great. It was fast. Adobe, as a company, built all of their design software specifically for the Mac environment first. And so there was this big love-hate relationship.
And then the government adopted Adobe, and that's kind of what the government uses a ton of Mac too. I mean, iPhone's all they'll use.
Yes, but still in the enterprise world, PCs are still what they consider to be most open network for, all the networking stuff. I've got my own opinion about that because of open backdoors and
I know they issue iPhones to everybody. Like that's if
an iPhone is different than the computer, but yes,
there's more security on the iPhone. I mean, according to the government, so. I mean, I guess I don't know that part of it, the security part of it, backdoor part of it. I'm not like a coder or a programmer or anything like that. So
yeah. Anyway, long story short, that was the beginning of me starting to push all my PCs out of the way and start putting all my Macs into it. So then I thought I'd buy Mac laptops because I'm always a mobile kind of a guy. So even this setup is still a laptop behind the monitors.
Yeah.
And
I love the integration.
Convert my wife over to it because I was tired of her calling me 20 times a day saying, why isn't this working on her little PC? And then the mobile phones, I was always a generation or two behind because I couldn't afford to keep up with and still can't afford to keep up with.
Who can? I mean, it's like you have to maybe Vandersloot.
Well, yeah. When you've got the money to just do that, yeah. I mean, now cell phones are minimum $1,000.
$1,000 each, yeah.
Then you got to pay that off for 2 years, and
at least there's zero interest loans from the cell phone companies. I mean, and lots of people consider that like a gift from them. It's actually not a gift. It's a way to keep you tied to them, because if you don't take that payment plan with them, you can't use that phone to get so if I go in and I say I want to trade up for the iPhone 15 because I'm still running off the 14 Pro, and I go in and decide I want to get the 15 Pro Max, I can take this phone in and trade it in, and they'll give me $400 or $500 off of the 15 Pro Max, so long as I enter into a payment program with them and never break that payment program. If I ever break that payment program,
then you got to pay it all.
Then I got to pay that $400, $500, or $600, whatever it is, back to them that I paid for that phone. That phone was supposed to, and you don't get your old phone back.
No.
So you have to pay them for it. So reality is you're actually better off.
I mean, it's brilliant, but it's also
it's a brilliant
kind of a scam.
It's a brilliant corporation retention plan
it's to keep people in debt for wanting to have the newest, best thing, and it's a good thing and it's a bad thing at the same time.
It's not bad debt. I mean, it's like 0% interest. So I mean, you're just making payments basically is what you're doing. I mean, but the problem with it is that they're quietly. I predict a lawsuit on this eventually because they're basically making you stay with them. Essentially is what they're doing. Because if you want to go with AT&T or somebody else has to offer to pay that $400 to $600 back to get you out of that contract. Otherwise, you're going to lose a bunch of money on it. So it's an interesting setup. It was a brilliant idea by whoever came up with it, but it's not exactly a gift on their part. So.
Yeah, so again, we kept the tangent going, but you've got an iPhone 14 Pro and I've got the iPhone 14 Pro Max.
Right.
So it's just cameras and operating system.
On the 15, they changed that though. On the 15, the 15 Pro Max has a better camera now.
It does.
Than the 15 Pro, which is upsetting to me.
The Pro Max has 3 cameras. This one has 2. Yours has 2, right? So it has.
Mine has 3.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Yeah, so our cameras are exactly the same on the 14, but on the 15 they changed it, and it's I think the only thing that's different is the zooming technology.
Optical, the macros and then the opticals. I mean, then you've got to get your colors and this, that, and the other. And
I just don't want a brick. I don't want. I mean, if I want a tablet, I'll go get an iPad.
Well, now there's rumors that the next thing they're going to do is foldable. because Samsung, I think it's Samsung, already has foldable.
Samsung, yeah, they have for a while.
And it's not just foldable phones, but foldable tablets. That when the tablet is folded up, it's like the size of a mobile device.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool.
Wyatt has one. Wyatt has a Z Flip.
Okay.
Foldable. And then they've got the I can't remember what the tablet's called. It's anyway. Yeah. They've got a tablet out and it folds out into a big tablet. Wyatt's little phone, I mean, it'll fold up. And my first thought on that was, okay, yeah, right, but in Idaho we get below zero weather all the time. Every winter it's going to break. It never did. Yeah. And he's dropped that thing like 1,000 times. He's 8. And so, of course he has. And it's a tough phone. Tough phone.
Yeah.
He did end up doing something to it. I can't remember what it was. He dropped it, and I think it cracked like the outer screen because it's like clamshell design. Mm-hmm. He cracked like the outer screen, so we took it in, and we ended up getting a Fru phone, which is Verizon's acronym for a remanufactured phone that they've gone through. And they're really good phones. They've always been good. I mean, they go through quite the extensive process, but so we ended up doing that. But it's been a tough phone. It really has.
That's cool. Yeah, the like Mac rumors or whatever that I've seen about the foldable tablet, it's like an iPad mini, but that folds maybe a little bigger than that. So maybe an 11-inch screen when it's open. Mm-hmm. But then when you close it, the back side is actually a screen as well. So then it's like closed, it looks like an iPhone, but just like double thick.
Okay.
So then that disables when you open, and then you've got a full tablet screen, and you can still take calls with it like wide open if you wanted to. I wouldn't want to do that, but you close it and you still have a full screen just like an iPhone home screen. So technology is pretty wild.
I think the whole thing's extremely cool. I'm just not, until they get it slimlined, I'm really not interested in it, You remember the old Motorola Razors, the phones?
Oh, yeah.
They were sweet.
Yep.
Pop those open and they were all thin. It was like that thin when they were folded up. And as soon as they come out with something like that, okay, then I can start looking at it,
The technology will get there to where they don't have to be as thick as,
Yeah, because Wyatt's phone is like that thick when it's folded up.
Pocket, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he hates it. That's one of the things he can't stand about it.
Sticks out.
I've actually been thinking about getting him an iPhone 11 like Louisa has. Mm-hmm. Because they're small. They're tiny, and it'd be perfect for an 8-year-old. Because it'll slip right in all his pockets, still has a decent camera, the whole 9 yards. And so I was thinking about that.
Well, you had asked me to pull up
Yes, please share that.
A meme with you, and it's going to tie to what we talked about last week. And unfortunately, it's a little bit on the more negative side of the thought process than just talking about technology and its advancements. But in reference to what we talked about last week, it had to do with just being overtaxed.
Yeah, and I can't remember why I wanted you to share this, but
it had to do with your truck, and that when we were in context, we were talking about taxes being meant for the people,
right?
For the government to be able to provide for the people, for the infrastructure, and therefore the defense of those people when an outside force comes in. Like most rudimentary definition of
it's
what
really
our government
interesting
is for.
to me, though. It's really interesting to me, Aaron, because you get people that will defend taxes. Well, we got to have a certain amount of taxes for this. We got to have a certain amount of taxes for that.
In one respect, yes, that form of taxation is meant to be building the infrastructure by which you can live your average everyday life to go to and from places and not have a restriction from being able to get somewhere. So the most easy way to represent infrastructure is a road system. So therefore the connection to your truck and potholes, because then this meme I sent to you,
I shared it.
It happened to be related to that. It says, this is the quote from whoever posted this: "Would you kindly fix the road I was already taxed to fix? So I'm not causing damage to the car I am taxed annually to drive, which I purchased with the income you already taxed, which sits in the driveway of my home that is highly taxed."
Yes, sir.
So there's one of those. There's been a couple other things where we could go down that channel as well, but we don't need to. But anyway, that's why you asked me to bring that up, is because the damage that it causes to a vehicle because a city or a state, depending on the road that you're on,
Yeah.
not utilizing those taxes properly, other than just to overpay some bureaucrat who sits in a big white building somewhere in the capital of said state and come up with erroneous reasons to oppress the people instead of provide for their commonwealth.
Yeah.
To use old school language there, but
Well, I think the problem that I really have with taxation is that it's funding programs that you and I and 90% of America would never agree to fund.
yeah.
When you're awarding a few people $500,000 to study cockroach farts,
Yep, exactly.
you know, or whatever it might be. We all hear about these things. And they're out there. They're real. These things are real, by the way. And yet our debt, our national debt, is going through the roof. I mean, it's gone through the roof. We're beyond. Why are we still spending money on? I mean,
Well,
that's just pork that we don't need
to. I just read another post today on Telegram, because that's where I filter through all the news things that are going on.
Do you use the new Twitter?
Yeah.
I love it. It's actually
I just have it to follow Elon and Tucker Carlson and then Mac Rumors. That's the only three people I follow.
they're not. I mean, it's like everything goes in there now. I mean, it's
There's
like
a lot of information in there, and it's too much. So Telegram allows me to just follow very specific people, and whenever they post it, it notifies me that that's what they've said, and then it puts it in a chronological order. And then there's no advertisements. There's no, marketing advertisements that come popping through. It's literally just like a bulletin board. Whatever this person posts, I see it, and it.
What was the one that went under?
Parler.
That was a good system.
It was too.
That was a
part
really
of
good
that,
system.
Yeah. And Truth Social, though it's Trump's, is still going, but I don't think it's caught the marketing traction that some of these others have as well. Although Biden's administration just requested to have an account on Truth Social, so that was interesting last week. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. That is very interesting.
So the taxation thing, as it relates to the average American, so to be part of what our little mini talk show, our little bitch fest, whatever we want to call it, the whole taxation times, the excessive taxes on us also goes down to not just your home, but your car. And when your car breaks because of something that was completely outside of your control, man, Idaho Falls specifically has had a torturous obstacle course of potholes in this town. Up until just recently, they started cleaning it all up, and they did a pretty good job. And they went beyond just fixing the holes. They've actually repaved the entire streets all the way down. So I will give them credit for now. We'll see how this winter it goes. The excuse is just, oh, well, it's always frozen all the time, so we can't repair anything.
Yeah.
And the moment that the weather changes, get on it,
Yeah, right.
And I've come in my past in one of my jobs from a public works inspection perspective, and so I'm like, no, this is not an excuse. Anyways, the fact of the matter is that, when you do make money and you do purchase a vehicle, which are astronomically expensive anymore.
They are.
And you go and you put something together to where you can ride in comfort to get from your job to and from. And with your job specifically, it's not just to the office and back. You are driving all over
That is my office.
Timbuktu.
Yeah.
Your truck is your office, exactly.
Yeah.
When you hit a pothole and it throws off your alignment, or it pops a tire, or it bends a rim, or
you just disappear forever.
Yeah, you goodbye.
You disappear out of sight. You're gone.
Got to call the emergency crews to pull you out. Like the old, oh man, do you remember that back in the day? There's another rabbit hole. When the kids used to fall into holes, and you'd see on the news all the rescue teams pulling kids and goats and animals and stuff out of holes because they just disappeared.
It's like, where'd that hole come from?
Where'd that hole come from, and why don't we ever see that news anymore about kids falling in holes anymore? Was that only for those 5 years?
That's so funny.
That's a random thought.
Yeah. We were just talking about that. I was talking with Melissa last night about that. There's There's like you remember back in the day. Well, you may not have heard about it, but we had a bunch of cattle mutilations up here, like in the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming. There was a bunch of cattle mutilations that went on like between like 1978 and 1984, and it was bad. And it's still a huge mystery.
People would come along and just kill it.
Like they'd find like ranchers would find their cattle mutilated, like their eyes would be gone, their jaws would be gone, their tongue would be gone, and it was laser precision cut out. Like there's all kinds of conspiracy
Oh,
theories
so they
about
don't
it.
even know what
UFOs,
happened.
UFOs coming in and
Oh.
laser taking these parts and blood dry. There was no blood in them. I mean, it's just carcasses, but they were like fresh, like that night. You know, I mean, it was
Here in Idaho?
in Idaho, the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, Utah. Now it's even recently happened in Texas,
Oh.
and so it's
I haven't
kind of
heard about it
interesting.
that way. I have heard
Like
about
nowadays, I can kind of see
the whole
some of the
field of
technology,
the
but
cows being just dead
yeah,
during all of the COVID thing is like, well, wait a minute.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, I said the bad word.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but all of a sudden, just a whole ranch of cows all just on
yep,
their side stiff and legs sticking out. Like,
yeah,
what happened there?
yeah,
And yeah, again, news that pops up and then you never hear from it ever again and you don't have to hear the bottom of it because there's so much news going on, so many things that are crazy.
Well, when this cattle mutilation stuff was going on, they seriously canceled Halloween. I mean, it got scary because it hit so close to home. I mean, there was a lot going on with that. And it was scary. It was scary. I'll be the first to admit, like when we were kids, we were kind of scared of that. We're like, what in the world is going on? Because there were some ranchers just right outside of town here that lost some cows. And it looked like the skin was actually laser etched from around their eyes, and then their eyes were out of the socket and gone. Bled dry. The whole body was bled dry. I mean, it was pretty scary stuff. And they never
Interesting.
did get to the bottom of it.
Wow.
There's a lot of biologists that think, oh well, studying coyote, when you see this, you got these canines, they fit together perfect, and these incisors, and they could cause a cut like this. And it's like you look at the cow and you're like, that's not a coyote, that's not a wolf. I mean, back then there were no wolves because they hadn't reintroduced them yet. But it was kind of interesting what happened with all that. You'll have to look it up, Google
Yeah.
it. Cattle mutilations.
I'll have to check it out.
Yep. I think they even did a movie about it.
Mm.
And the movie kind of insinuated that was UFOs that came in and dropped down on the fields and
It's
picked them up. And
probably some, um, you know, people that were hired to extract body parts from these critters for their medical purposes,
something.
and they surgically remove an eyeball and they put an IV in and drain all the blood out because they're going to probably use it for something else. And they're doing it in the black market so that such and such could happen in the dead of the night, and there's no trace of what's going on. Granted, if there's never any footprints or tire tracks or anything like that, that's why, the
It
UFO
it
idea
really
comes up.
got
But like,
it really got mysterious though, Aaron. It was like lots of them, their legs were broken, something picked them up and then dropped them out of the air, and back when they were done with them, like they took them up into a helicopter and performed all this and then just dropped them out of the helicopter or whatever. Um, the blood, so it wasn't just IV bled out of them; it was like vacuumed out. They like
so they were all shriveled
There
up.
wasn't even a speck of blood in their bodies. I mean, it was crazy. So
Interesting.
a lot of them, yeah. You'll have to look it up. I mean, it's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Fair warning. I mean, because it's interesting. I mean, what happened, and they didn't. It's just funny how it's just happened to cows. Because there's a lot of other big game out there: elk, deer, buffalo. I mean, in these parts anyway up here.
That's true.
And so,
Well, I was, when I pulled up that image of the taxation thing, it also made me see something else that I had saved off to the side that kind of spoke to me this week, and I forgot about it, and I thought I would talk about it with you, and for another 10-15 minutes or so that we can serve our time for this video specifically. We can kind of turn a little bit potentially heavier, but also something that's still from a husband and a father's perspective. I'd love to be able to kind of get your thoughts on this.
sure.
And really what this is referencing another gentleman's podcast. The gentleman's name is Shawn Ryan, The Shawn Ryan Show.
Okay.
And I'll put his link to his Instagram and to his YouTube here in the show notes. But he's a veteran who has a podcast similar to Joe Rogan, but it's a little bit more classy of an environment that he sits in. But he talks really deeply with a lot of guests. And this one guest that he had on is another gentleman by the name of John Lovell of Warrior Poet Society.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I know John Lovell.
Christian man. And I believe that Shawn Ryan has come to know the Lord as well, because some of the pretty serious conversations that they've got is through faith and belief in God. And a lot of the conversations that he's had is with fellow previous soldiers and the things that they deal with. John Lovell was also a soldier and is a Christian man who has some pretty deep thoughts, but also application to the way that he lives his life, the way he loves his wife, the way he trains his children, the way he trains people to protect themselves, because he also has this whole self-protection stuff from all of his experience, but then also the mindset of it, not just the practical application of how to protect oneself and or carry a weapon or be ready at a moment's notice to be the warrior, but to the poet part of it all is to know what you know and know it so well that exudes from you. And I really relate with that, and I need to study him even more. One of my brothers is actually follows him quite regularly and kind of falls in his footsteps with the way that he lives his life as well, having been a soldier himself, and the way he loves his wife and raises his children, very admirable. But having said all that as an introduction, there's this one quote that's specifically from one show that Shawn asked John, and the question that Shawn asked John was, what are some of the most important things to you that you would like to pass on to your kids? Now, this can go down the direction of parenting and child rearing, but what I'd rather focus on is the very last statement in his response. So I've transcribed his answer. It's just a short paragraph, and I'll read that aloud right now, and I'll put that transcript in the show notes as well. But John says, great question. So I want them to be courageous and bold. I want them to be well educated, know how to treat a woman they practice with their mom. I want them to know how to resolve conflict. I want them to be leaders. I want them to be honest. I don't really care what they do, but I want them to live worthy in the manner in which they live. That's the stuff that I actually care about. And I realize that the only possible way that I can build that in them is to be that myself. You can teach what you know, but you can only replicate who you are. So that's the end of the quote. That last sentence really, really spoke to me personally, and just knowing some of the conversations that you and I have had over the past couple of years, I thought this might be something that we could kind of dive into for a short while.
Sure.
About the fact that, yes, you can teach what you know, but you can only replicate who you are. So what you know is only a manifestation, and this is my paraphrasing, a manifestation of who you are inside. And therefore you practice what you know. But the who you are needs to be replicated in your posterity. But what do you think about that when it comes to replicating who you are versus training what you know? Do you have any thoughts on that? I know I just jumped that right on you real quick, but
Well, the thing, if you're okay, so if you want replication, that's not just an overnight. I'll teach a class on something and teach somebody how to do something. You've got to lead by example for years, days, months, years.
Yep.
And so if you're specifically wanting your kids to learn that, then it's how you live your life at home and how you live your life beyond that, and what they see in their dad, their hero that they look up to, or their mom. I mean, that they look up to. So
there can't be any difference, in my personal opinion, between the way that you live your life at home and the way you live your life at work, or the way you live your life.
Absolutely.
During your own personal time.
Yeah.
It needs to be who you are through and through. It has to be your ethos.
Yeah.
It has to be your true character, and therefore true character training true character.
Law enforcement teaches this.
Interesting.
In my former life in law enforcement, that's one of the first things they teach you at police academy, is that you're just because you're on the clock for 10 hours, 12 hours, when you get off doesn't mean you're off. You're not, you're still on the clock. Who you are, everybody knows that you're an officer. Everybody knows that you're a cop. And so when you're out there interacting with the public, you need to be that person. So.
Yeah, and even if you weren't saying it that, just because of my job, that's who I am on the clock.
Right.
It is one way of saying that, but it really needs to be the way you think regularly. And to kind of draw a parallel, regardless of, yours is a lot stronger of a parallel with the law enforcement thing because you're a peacemaker, not just a peacekeeper.
Correct.
There's a difference between those two terms. Yeah. I've even thought about this from a graphical or an artistic perspective.
One of them avoids conflict, and one of them, goes after it. So
I love that you just said that because that's exactly the direction I'm trying to go with this. In that, another comment that one of these gentlemen said in not just this post, but also in subsequent posts and things that I've lived my life, I aspire to live my life to, is that you have to be. I'm gonna use a biblical term from Joshua. You have to be ready for war and be a farmer. You have to have a sword on your back in its sheath, and you have to have a plow in your hand, meaning that you're cultivating the ground, you're cultivating the life around you, and you're ready at a moment's notice to defend it.
Yeah.
Now, I say all this specifically, again, in a tiny context about who you are as a person, specifically as men in today's world where we're being treated as though that's the wrong thing to be doing. We have to be gentle all the time. Having a sword on your back is not just a badge of, I've got a sword.
No.
If you don't know how to use that sword, then what good are you? You might as well just go stab it in the ground and find some rocks, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to use that sword not as an aggressor, but as a protector. Mm-hmm. Until such time as aggression is what's called for. And that's where the warrior poet juxtaposition that John Lovell is constantly referring to here is that men are called to be warriors, but they're also called to be gentle. Mm-hmm. And what that means is that you know when to keep that sword, that weapon, whatever the device may be, the tool, not weapon, but tool, sheathed.
Yep.
And know when to use it and when to put it away. Mm-hmm. To train that to your children, to your posterity, has to be who you are as a person, to bring it back to this context. Not just that I have guns lying around the house, or I've got a sword on the wall, or I've got, a cannon in the backyard, or a tank out in the front porch.
You need to show that holster you made before it's out here.
Yeah. So I think that the character and ethos of the man is not meant to be the one who just always lays down. Mm-hmm. Always lays down. No, there's a difference between a wolf and a sheepdog. They're both canine varieties, but a wolf is one who comes to steal and destroy. Mm-hmm. And a sheep, i.e. your family, for one, but those who are within your care are the ones who are not capable of protecting themselves until a specific time. And the sheepdog is the one who is both ferocious to protect the sheep from a wolf, be able to match the aggression, the fight, the gnashing of teeth, so to speak, in proverbial terms, but also be able to be respected and loved by the sheep. Yeah. And not eat the sheep and turn those teeth and claws on the sheep. So there's a fine balance there about the true character of a man. that I think that even to the name of our little show here, Blue Collar American, is what the founding fathers and our first generations of families in this nation knew how to do is they knew how to protect themselves. They knew how to go to war to protect what they owned,
They sure did.
but they also knew how to cultivate what they had, to be good stewards of what they had. And I think that there's just some beauty to that that I just felt worthy of at least talking about today.
Yeah.
And so even to your point, the juxtaposition of beauty and warfare all combined into one is a holster. And I spent some specific time talking through and making this leather holster. I handmade this holster for a weapon of mine that is meant to replicate the old school Wild West 6-gun shooter style holster where it's all hand tooled leather, but for a modern weapon. And it took me a long time to do this. This is my first one doing this, but I'm pretty proud of that. Some leather work, and I got to give tribute and honor to an older gentleman of whom let me use his leather and all of his tools to do all this, and then to stand over me and give me points and tips while I did all the hard work. But I'm pretty proud of that. So
Should be.
Paul
Yeah.
made me show
Looks
that off.
fantastic.
But there's an interesting juxtaposition even as we're talking about that, in that there's beauty, but it's holding something that can be used as a tool for
Yeah.
harm.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But there's also beauty in the craft of the tool in and of itself. And I choose my words very carefully for the venue by which we are.
Well, and it's almost like the old
presented.
generations knew that better than we do now, because you don't see that very often anymore. Now it's all tactical, and you know.
Well, yeah, considering the other one that I have sitting right here that's all made out of Kydex plastic and heat melted, and
But it does
it's
the
made
job.
by soldiers and it does its job, yes. But there's not necessarily any beauty to this. This is functionality. We're form and function.
Depending on who you are, but but you're right. There's definitely not. I mean, for the
but
world.
how many people walk around, or not walk around, but
No.
just have something like this? That one, there's pride of
Yeah.
the fact that this is my craftsmanship, and I love to just touch it because
Yeah.
all that texture. But also, it does the same job that this does.
It smells a heck of a lot better too. I love love the smell of leather.
It does the same job that this does. The exact same job.
Yeah. Yep.
One inside the waistband, one outside the waistband. But
Yeah.
and for the sensitivity of our audience and the channel by which we're posting it, I don't show the devices that go into them, because
Yeah.
you can write me and DM Paul separately and off camera.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. If you want to see some pictures, I've got a few things, and I'm sure Aaron does too. But
Until such time as we learn who our audience is and the venues by which we present those things, by no means am I an expert in any of those things, but we aspire to be.
sure looks
And
nice though,
that's
Aaron.
exactly what we're trying to get at here, is that we as men, I believe, are called to be experts in everything that we touch. And I am not yet. I have a lot to learn, and that's really what we want to express here in our honesty and openness. And I'm doing a lot of talking, so
You're just fine.
I'll let you do some talking.
No, you're just fine. I think it's going to be that way sometimes. I mean, there's a lot to say today, and you know,
I didn't think there was going to be anything to say today.
Yeah, well, that's usually the way it turns out. Yeah, I remember we were talking about that, and I'm like, yeah, it'll come, and it always does with us. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we're doing this. So there's just a lot to discuss and talk about in the world. So
Yeah, I agree with that.
but
Well, we've been
guess we've been doing it for a
kibitzing
bit.
for an hour or so, and
Yeah.
I want to honor your time and
Okay.
the things left to do. So we can probably close this evening off. We'll make sure that we put some of these items that we've discussed in the show notes. If you have any questions or comments, please just reach out to us as well. In order for our video podcast, whatever we call this, our channel to succeed, we would request that you like it and share it with somebody who you think might benefit from just listening to two guys talk through these kinds of things as well. And as we've said before, we'd love to be able to interview some other people and kind of share this wealth in person or online. So if you have some comments, or you have somebody that you think would really be somebody that would love to sit and chat with us about these kinds of things, drop us a note. And lastly, just make sure that you follow our channel so that the algorithms all work as well. And in the words of Paul, smash it.
Yeah, smash that like button,
Smash that like button.
For sure.
All right, guys, we appreciate you, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye, guys. Thanks. Appreciate you.